Sì, sì, prova sì.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I kindly ask you to take a seat, please, and we're going to start. I also ask Engineer Viviani to reach us here. Fine. So we expect a very intense morning. And okay, I will leave the floor right now to Mr. Guerrieri, the president of the Northern Tyrrhenian Port Authority. Can you hear us, President? The microphone, please. Presidente, deve accendere il microfono.
Sorry. Good morning. First of all, I would like to express my thanks to all those who are participating in this important day of discussion and study on the use of hydrogen in ports and industrial coastal areas. I would also like to thank the Clean Hydrogen Partnership and the delegation from Deloitte, to whom I extend my welcome to the port of Livorno, not only for the important results already achieved with the recently published European level study. It will be the subject of the first part of the workshop, but also for having included our port system as one of the 4 European case studies that will be subject in-depth analysis. As you know, environmental sustainability and resilience, or energy self-sufficiency, has become strategic themes over the last decade, also in the specific context of port, shipping, transport, and the integrated logistics that comes with them. Either the European policies as Green Deal, Next Generation EU, Repower EU, or the international initiative from the United States to Asia, as well as the numerous scientific evidence on the state of the art in the sector, increasingly indicate that the use of green hydrogen as an energy source, both as an energy carrier and as an alternative fuel in port and logistics processes, will be the key element for implementing environmental sustainability objectives and reducing dependence on fossil fuels. As widely recognized, port system authorities, but more generally ports, as key element of the logistic chain, can play an essential role in addressing the issues of energy transition by developing local initiatives at the community level, which are first in line and convergent with higher level guidelines, global, European, and national, and second, which can be configured as best practices to actively support and integrated the implementation of other initiatives by a systemic point of view. But this is not the only role that ports, with their logistics and industrial system, can play. The startup of hydrogen value chains can be supported more directly by promoting networking between interested companies, or promoting the potential of the local system toward the potential investor, or directly participating in small investments aimed at lightening up new chain segments using the financial instruments available, specifically European funds. For this reasons, since July 2020, the date of publication of the European policy on hydrogen, the Northern Tyrrhenian Seaport System Authority has worked to create the basis for the birth of the real hydrogen value chain, a hydrogen valley for the Tuscan coast, serving shipping, logistics, and the industrial facilities of the Upper Tyrrhenian. This has been done through developing pilot actions and experimentation, realizing in-depth study, and participating in investments for infrastructural works, all action capable of profitably integrating the potential offered by the ports of Livorno, Piombino, and the Port of Alville, with the business and the research networks existing in our territory. Speaking about the territories, of course, I would like to underline that these activities are integrated and intended to support the other important action promoted by the Tuscan region, with the four so-called H2 tables. Thanks to these initiatives, and thanks to the wide and responsive business and research networks operating in Tuscany, the Tuscany region has been able to collect a significant number of ideas and project proposals on the hydrogen theme in order to better direct the addressing and the funds made available by the National Resilience Plan for the Energy Transition. In the context outlined above, therefore, we can consider today's initiative promoted by Deloitte on behalf of the European Commission in collaboration with our authority, Port Authority, as a further step in the right direction, an occasion aimed at reaching the dual objective of sharing the results achieved so far by Deloitte with the study on hydrogen ports and industrial cost areas, and enabling a fruitful exchange of information, experiences, and investment opportunities among the various participants. To conclude, this workshop will provide a further opportunity to discuss how the port system can be developed in order to integrate and promote the use of hydrogen in its activity, and how this could be achieved, both through public intervention and through the involvement of the private sector, including startups. The objective of this workshop is to share key insights from a study on hydrogen demand and supply, exchange, exchange knowledge on the use of hydrogen in maritime and road transport, and develop an action plan to initiate hydrogen and use in the Livorno region. In particular, we will discuss how to improve the green energy supply chain at ports by connecting production sites onshore, offshore, with the port's terminal infrastructures and the customer sites, shipping companies, industrial customers. Stakeholders are expected to go through a pre-read of a preliminary case study for hydrogen and use in maritime and road transport before the workshop and share their relevant hydrogen insights during the event. We also analyze which business models are best suited to this and which public-private partnership can be established in order to develop them. Now, I will pass the floor to the next speaker, and I renewing my best wishes for the success of this important meeting. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, as I told you before, we expect a very intense morning, and I don't want to lose any time. I need to introduce myself. I am Francesco Alberto De Bari. I am the head of European Programs and Innovation of the Port Authority. And I would like, first of all, to thank Deloitte, Peter Smits, and Walter Kosseners, I guess I pronunciated it the right way, for the work they are carrying out. We are in the beautiful Villa Letizia. Letizia is an Italian name that means gladness, and we are guests of the Pisa University. Therefore, I give the floor to Professor Davide Aloini for a brief introduction and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Bari. Welcome you all. My name is Davide Aloini. I'm a associate professor of business process management at the University of Pisa. I'm really happy to be here with you this morning, and it's a pleasure for me, and it's an honor to welcome you all on behalf for the head of the Logistics Center, that's Professor Gianluca Dini, that unfortunately cannot be here due to institutional tasks and incumbents. However, just a few words to introduce you to this nice place. This is the Logistics Center of the University of Pisa. It's a research center, it's a training center. It is funded by the Leghorn Port Authority. It's funded by University of Pisa, Leghorn Municipality, and also Leghorn Bank Foundation. It's a multidisciplinary research center active in logistics with more than 40 research and professors active with training program. We have one master degree, one bachelor, and a master course that I lead in smart and sustainable operation in maritime and port logistics. So sustainability is the core of the development of training program and the research program here in this center. I don't want to take more time, just welcome and enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this place. I hope that you will have a very fruitful working day. The topic is really interesting and very curious to participate to our discussion. Obviously, I thank you all, Deloitte, first of all, and Francesco Alberto De Bari for organizing this meeting here, President Guerrieri for his interesting speech. Thank you, and enjoy the place.
Thank you. So President Guerrieri already gave us somehow the overall framework and the big picture of what we are doing here today. I just would like to highlight that Livorno is the only Mediterranean port involved in the case study in depth that Deloitte is carrying out. As a result of that, our port community and our coastal industrial ecosystem, here you are, have the opportunity to show its potential and initiatives. Why? You should consider that the complete version of the study that Deloitte is carrying out is going to figure out the role that Tuscan coast can play and somehow pave the ground to have a key role in the upcoming hydrogen ports and coastal roadmap that the European Union is now going to define. It is something that could really strengthen our ability, both of the public and the private sector to access European funds related to the so-called special facilities, the Hydrogen Bank. So we are here to explain to Deloitte what our initiatives are and what we are willing to do to be on the cutting edge of what is coming on. Then we will discuss in depth later all these aspects. I would like just to outline 3 main goals and work axes we have. The first is related to the role that our port network, not only Livorno, the port network of the North Mediterranean, encompassing also Piombino, the role that could have that is going to have as an energy hub for the import of green hydrogen produced elsewhere. And here I would like to thank Mr. Dubir Gerber that reached us from Tel Aviv in Israel, demonstrating like that the interest that the logistic node of this part of the coastal area of Tuscany has for a number of industrial and international subjects at Mediterranean level. Second, at a local scope, better not local, at a coastal scope, the launch of the Hydrogen Valley, in the words of Deloitte, in the vicinity of the port, is something we can really do. The third message is that we have the aim of leveraging the hydrogen-related technologies, the hydrogen-related know-how, and hydrogen-related entrepreneurial fabric that is already embedded in the Tuscan coastal area. Okay, this is something we figured out thanks to Ambrosetti, and the path towards the ramp-up of the Tuscan Hydrogen Valley and the role of this coastal entrepreneurial fabric were the specific subject of the blueprint prepared last year with the European House Ambrosetti. Therefore, I have the pleasure to leave the floor to engineer Alessandro Viviani that will explain us something more about what is the state of the art we reached thanks to the blueprint. Please, Alessandro.
Thank you, Francesco Alberto. Thank you all. Thank you to you. Thank you to Deloitte for inviting us at this event, this workshop. I have some presentation. Yes, I may ask you Thank you. Thank you a lot. So, as was said by Francesco, we were engaged together with the authority in last 2021 in defining a potential roadmap, a potential blueprint for the Port Authority in, let me say, a vision for the hydrogen usage in the Tuscany coast. So, the other presentation, please. So, just let me say who is the European House Ambrosetti. The European House Ambrosetti is a leading consultancy firm in Italy. We are also the first think tank in Italy, the first in Europe, among the most respected around the world, mainly apart from management consulting. We also, let me say, we are engaged in several working tables in Italy around the topics of energy. We started speaking about hydrogen on last 2019-2020, together with Italian leading players, in which we tried to define a first roadmap for Italy as a whole on the hydrogen, not only focusing on the opportunity for sustainability, but especially on the opportunity for industrial development around hydrogen. And let me say, this is the vision also that we leverage when dealing together with the Port Authority in our study. Let me say that we have also then continued our positioning, leveraging on the principle and promoting the principle of technology neutrality in Italy and Europe. This is just the final results of a working paper that we have discussed both at the Italian and European level. And we are also really proud that Giorgia Meloni, which is our Prime Minister, heard about our study before becoming the Prime Minister, and then is also embracing this principle both at the Italian level and lastly also at the global level a few days ago in Japan. We have also running an Italian leading community on hydrogen. Here is just some of the players that come with us to discuss and to, let me say, produce new knowledge around hydrogen in Italy in order to promote initiatives and overcome, let me say, what are the current roadblocks to define new projects around hydrogen in Italy. As I was said, we partnered together with the authority in 2021, and we are really proud that the blueprint arrived at this stage of discussion at the European level, thanks also to Deloitte for focusing on this project. What was the, let me say, the scope? It was not a technical assessment. There are some technical, let me say, thinking. It was not, let me say, an economic feasibility study. It was just a first counting of opportunities on the territory, on how the coast of Tuscany can leverage on the development on focus, creating opportunities for its development, and what could be the governance role of the port authorities in this. Of course, we work on different levels. The first one was to identify what could be the production and usage opportunity for the port, for the Tuscany coast area. And the second one was to identify potential industrial opportunity for the manufacturing and the other value chains in the coast areas. And of course, this comes from an analysis of what is, let me say, hydrogen, what are the main opportunities, and what are the main characteristics of the coast area in Tuscany. And let me say, to do so, we work on different stages. Let me just underline that we work a lot with stakeholders. We have some working tables. We're dealing with academia, with technical partner of the Port Authority. There were also a working table in which some of you were present in October 2021. As I said, the focus was on the cost of Tuscany, but of course, we have also taken into account that the cost of Tuscany is within a regional manufacturing cluster, and that there is, let me say, a network of infrastructure that has in Livorno, let me say, a point of interest. So the focus was quite different depending on the different opportunities that was assessed. Let me just say why we consider important to focus on Tuscany. For this, let me just underline 4 main points. The Port of Livorno is the 3rd Italian cargo logistic point. It's also the 3rd in terms of passenger flows. Tuscany is the 5th largest manufacturing region in Italy, and it's a particular position in the hard-to-abate industry. We just also have to consider that 41% of the energy balance of the Tuscany is dedicated to the use in a hard-to-abate industry. Let me say also we have a higher energy-intensive activities compared to the rest of Italy. Those are just few figures, then we will deeply assess in the coming slides. First point, let me start with the identification of potential opportunity from the usage and for the production. Where we start from, we analyzed 12 potential areas of hydrogen usage. Some of those, 8 of those, was, let me say, within and outside the port areas. We also, in the transportation sector, we also analyzed some opportunities within the civilian use. We also analyzed some opportunities in collaboration with hard-to-abate industry, and we had, let me say, a special focus on a potential use of hydrogen in Ireland. Of course, we also analyzed point A, point B, which referred the point A on the distribution. So we need, let me say, the procurement and the possibility to establish a logistic related to hydrogen, and let me say also the possibility to produce or import hydrogen to be used in those kind of facility. All of this opportunity was analyzed also together with the technical and academia partners under 2, let me say, point of view. The first was a technical feasibility, in which we asked whether the technology, the market was mature. Of course, at that time, things in 2 years, fortunately, changed quite a lot in some areas. And also whether there was, let me say, a competitiveness of hydrogen compared to other potential decarbonization alternative, in particular electrification and biofuels. On the other side, we also assess the ease of implementation, and so whether there were an ecosystem capable to accept and to integrate hydrogen technologies in their operation. The final results, let me say very synthetic, was this matrix in which we prioritize some of the activities that could be explored by the Port Authority. I just started with the green one that will be assessed a little bit more in detail following, in which most of them focus on the activities within the port. So we have the rail activities within the port, the heavy transportation within the ports, and the potential use of hydrogen for cold ironing, where electrification could have, let me say, a role, and also some opportunity for use hydrogen for building heating. Of course, there are other potential activities outside. One is the connection with the local public transport outside. And in this, we have to scout whether could be the system activity that the authority could have in facilitating initiative outside its area. I would also focus on the number 11, in which we analyze the potential of hydrogen decarbonization. Of course, it is an opportunity that needs to be taken into account. It is an opportunity that is quite far from the scope of the authority, but anyway, the authority could have a role in being, let me say, an infrastructure provider, hydrogen provider for those kind of activities outside. Here is just some of the results. I don't go in the details of this, but for each of those points, there was an analysis of potential investment that are required by 2025 and 2030, and also an estimation of the hydrogen that would be required by the different opportunities. Of course, at the time, we also focus on the opportunity that was related to the National Resilience Plan. Of course, there has been some development on that side too. Let me just focus, I just go quickly on this. For any question, please stop me later on what should be, let me say, the stakeholder engagement that we need to rise around those kind of activity. Is just the point regarding the activities within the port. Of course, the role of authority will be to define a decarbonization agenda for the port on one side, and to share this with the stakeholders that work within the port. On one side, there is also the role of public institutions, both at the central and the regional level, in which they need to find a way in which to support this kind of agenda. And I will focus on this later on, both on the CapEx, but especially on the OpEx side. Of course, many of the activities that we propose at the very end need to be bared by the operators that work within the port area, in which there is no constraint or incentives dedicated to this. And in our position, the Port Authority that work under a concession agreement with those kind of players need to define a reward system for those players that work to realize the decarbonization agenda of the port. But of course, we need to take carefully in mind that asking those kind of investment to port operator is something that requires money, is something that, let me say, is a matter of competitiveness of the port. So we need to ask for those kind of investment on one side. On the other side, we need to think carefully at the political level on how to sustain this decarbonization agenda, not hampering the competitiveness of the activity, of the economic activities of the operator within the port. I just run within the different opportunities also outside is the possibility to share infrastructure with public transport outside the port. Of course, if we have a development of refuel infrastructure for the captive activity of the port, this could be shared also for the activities, some of the activities, especially in the public sector outside. And also in this, what is important to understand is that there is a potential role of different stakeholders, mainly at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transports, in which we need to change the way in which public mobility service as procured. We need to move from a model in which we procure the service based on passenger kilometer on a different model that weights passenger kilometer and reduces CO2. So to support the potential efforts in reducing the impact of this, and also leveraging the potential impact of hydrogen as a decarbonization lever, taking into account that hydrogen currently is a higher cost compared to potential other fuel. Of course, in this we need to take into account that hydrogen is one option that can be used in some cases. Of course, there is other fuel that can be readily used, especially if we take into account, I don't know, the biofuels that are currently available. As you may see, we didn't take into account the railway sector outside the port area, because even if we have non-electrified lines outside the area, we consider most effective the electrical battery and other kind of technology compared to other areas. So there will be no space, in our opinion, for those kind of hydrogen technology. I just run because I think I'm finishing the time that I have at the very end. We also focused on the potential, let me say, opportunities for under the industrial point of view. And in this, our activities was focused on the identification of opportunities for the manufacturing. And we started from a work in which we analyzed what are the technologies that could be developed by our manufacturing value chain. And we identified at the Italian stage 90 manufacturing goods that can be developed and be used within the hydrogen value chain. Of course, in this, we have to take into account that when looking at hydrogen, we have different kind of technology. Of course, the technology for the production, electrolyzer and so on one side, and technology for the use of hydrogen, like fuel cell. But we need also to take into account that those technologies need to be integrated within complex system in the transport, in the industrial sector. And in this, there could be opportunities, because we have leadership in technology, in thermal, in electrical technologies that could pass from traditional fuel to hydrogen fuel. And we analyze different opportunities. Of course, if we look at the Tuscany manufacturing, Tuscany is, on those 90 technology, Tuscany is the 5th manufacturing force in Italy. And we analyze different opportunities especially within the paper industry and the paper machinery industry, within the marine industry and the logistic vehicles industry. And we, in this, are presented in the study, we presented what could be the leadership of Tuscany in some area of this. This is presented the leadership that Tuscany has in the machinery for the paper production. Most of this is located in the area of the Port Authority. The second one was related to the paper and cardboard production, which is Tuscany is the second leading, and we need to think about on how to decarbonize this hard-to-abate industry. The third one is related to the boat industry. Tuscany has is the third, or the second in the Druid Liguria region in terms of industry. Most of this is located in the coast area. And, but we need to take into account that of a particular leadership within the province of Lucca regarding what we call the recreational boating. Lucca is the first province in Italy in terms of turnover and employed in this area. So there could be an opportunity to understand how to integrate hydrogen to sustain the companies that are turning their traditional fuel system into a new kind of fuel system. The last one opportunities was related to the automotive and logistic vehicle sector, in which Tuscany is the first region. Let me just close with a few considerations regarding the potential role of the Port Authority. First of all, there is the need for setting a decarbonization agenda. Of course, our study helped in identify what kind of opportunity within the area could leverage on hydrogen for the decarbonization. Of course, there is the opportunity to facilitate the usage of the construction of infrastructure. I didn't stop on that point, but of course there is a matter of where the hydrogen would come from. Of course, there will be the opportunity to leverage on the areas to produce directly hydrogen, but we didn't have to forget that hydrogen, it is not a way to produce themselves energy. It is a matter of different import of energy. If we look at the European agenda, half of the hydrogen that is foreseen will come from abroad, and I think that the authority has already a leading role in Italy in what was the LNG program that could benefit from the future hydrogen import facilities. Of course, we need to consider also a point. We are in Livorno. Once the hydrogen is imported in Livorno with a potential future facility, then we need to understand where this hydrogen could be bring in point of consumption that could be away. So accompany this effort from the authority with another effort under the infrastructure point of view. Let me say, on my side, Francesco Alberto, I would just close with some of the updates that we are currently looking at in our community that could be helpful for the work of the table today. Those are just some of the outcomes that come from the work of our hydrogen community, in which we recently analyzed how in Italy it is currently lacking a governance for hydrogen. We didn't have a strategy, and we need a strategy that's coupled together sustainability and asset competitiveness, as has been done in other countries in Europe. We need to understand how to define infrastructure and to have a role for hydrogen import in Italy, in which we can position Italy as a leading strategic role within the European ecosystem. We need to set up clearly what could be also the opportunity for blue hydrogen. On our opinion, when considering a blue hydrogen completely decarbonized, we need to consider this as a potential lever. We need to take in consideration that currently 99% of the 11 megatons of hydrogen produced in Europe come from fossil fuel, and we have the opportunity to start decarbonizing this before starting producing hydrogen from renewable. That, of course, is good, is the long way vision, but for the time being, we need to grasp the opportunity that we have. At the very end, let me say, we need to more focus on the balancing within OPEX and CAPEX. We have many effort on the National Resilience Plan in Italy, but of course this is most CAPEX intensive, sustain. But what is asked by the industry is to focus on the OPEX, and this is something that currently in Italy is lacking. So I just ended, sorry for rushing among the study we have done. Francesco Alberto, thank you for the opportunity. I'm available for any question. Thank you.
I have to say that the Ambrosetti initiative related to H2 at Innotec is something of really paramount importance and great interest in our point.
Effettivamente lui da interinale qualcuno l'ha già fatto.
Okay. The approach of the technological neutrality is also something we should focus and say something about. Okay, about the idea of the Hydrogen Valley, before giving the floor to Director Tedeschi of Regione Toscana, I don't know if he's going to take the floor now or later, but I would like to say just some highlights. First, Regione Toscana launched a number of consultations and create a database of initiatives. What we made as a Port Authority together with the Regione Toscana is an assessment in depth in order to help the fine-tuning of the upcoming investments and funding related to the National Recovery Plan. Somehow we want to facilitate the matching between different initiatives. You see, I'm talking about your initiatives, okay? The initiatives you already somehow anticipated to Regione Toscana. And we would like to define some cluster of consistent and strongly linked initiatives. What is the aim? The aim is to avoid financing specific standalone projects. We would like rather to finance some sets of initiatives to create small, because we are talking about Hydrogen Valley, so at a local scope, but small but somehow complete and significant value chain related to hydrogen. We already shared with Regione Toscana the idea of a platform, a tool to help this kind of aggregation. And at the end, as Alessandro told us before, we have two features we can really leverage. The first is the seaport assets we have on the Tuscan coast. The second is, as I told you before, the technological know-how, the entrepreneurial fabric, lo voglio dire in italiano per essere sicuro che passi il messaggio, cioè il tessuto industriale hydrogen related is something that we can really consider a specific feature of the Tuscan coast, and it is something we have to leverage. Then we have two focus that we are going to discuss much more in depth later that are both related to the ramp up of the Hydrogen Valley. The first is the heavy road transport. Everybody knows, I guess, that Livorno is one of the major ro-ro ports in Italy, not only Livorno, but also Piombino with the ferries. I would like to say something specific about ferries. I'm looking to Engineer Coronello of Fincantieri. Thank you for coming here in Livorno. And we are generating huge road traffic. We are working at a strategic level, and we are also shareholders of our railroad terminal, the Interporto Toscano, that plays a role not only as a modal shift facility, but also as a buffer and a provider of services related to heavy transport. What we are going to do, and we will discuss it in depth within the case study with Deloitte, is how to invest in a proper way to build up the facilities we need to have the storage and distribution of hydrogen for heavy road transport. The second focus I would like to say you something about is the hydrogen in maritime transport. But I don't want to lose time, and I know the morning is very intense, so I will tell you something specific about hydrogen in maritime, specifically in maritime transport later, and I give the floor to Peter for his presentation of the outcomes of the study of hydrogen in ports. And he will start giving us some key insights arising from the study. Thank you. Please, Peter.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending. It's a great show of the interest on the hydrogen topic that lives here in the Tuscan region and in Livorno in particular. Thanks also for the kind introductions and for the wonderful setting where we can have the workshop. It's a really nice environment to be in. My name is Pieter Smeets. I'm a director at Deloitte based in Brussels, focusing indeed on some of the case studies as part of the hydrogen at ports work that we're doing for the European Commission. My background, very briefly, I have a long background in the industry, in the petrochemical industry, where I was also responsible for looking at hydrogen-related strategies and projects. And now I'm focusing in Deloitte on developing sustainability and strategies for many different areas. So maybe. Where do I point? Oh yeah. Oh. that was a little bit too fast. So maybe first starting with the with the overview, the agenda of today. So what we will start with first is an overview of the key outcomes of the hydrogen imports study. Then a brief context on what is the case study we are looking into for Livorno in particular. Part of that case study is also developing a financial model. So we will present the preliminary financial analysis related to the case study, and then followed by a conclusion by Francesco Alberto. After a short break, we will then go into an interactive part of the agenda where we will, and I think it was highlighted by all the speakers. It's not a standalone initiative, hydrogen. You really need to develop that whole ecosystem. Everything needs to be working together to really get hydrogen off the ground and start looking at the implementation. So we'll start looking at how can we develop that ecosystem, and in a second workshop or in a second activity, we'll be looking at how does working together look like for the Livorno port. Then we'll have a wrap up and closing, followed by the lunch, and then I think there will be a site visit as well afterwards. So let me see. Yeah, okay. So for us, the objectives of today, the key objectives, what we want to get out of this workshop and why it's so important that all of you are here. First, we want to share, as mentioned, the results on the study of hydrogen imports. Then look at that financial analysis that we've done. But the important part there is also to discuss it. We've made some assumptions, and we would like to test those assumptions also with the audience to see if it makes sense. Then again, define the added value of creating that ecosystem around hydrogen in the region, and initiate a collaboration between. So I will now switch gears into what are some of the initial results of that of the hydrogen import study. So we were asked by the European Commission to perform this study, and the key objectives are to help create visibility on what is the market potential around hydrogen imports, and what is also roadmap towards implementing that. And then secondly, also building that community. We understand, we realize many entities need to collaborate together, and that can really accelerate the uptake of hydrogen plants in the ports if the community comes together. There are a few tasks identified in the study that we've been asked to do by the European Commission. First task was around hydrogen demand and market potential, then around supply, storage and distribution, and around business models. What we are focusing on is task 4 also, and that is on the case studies. And of course, this European Commission study also falls under a broader umbrella of the Clean Energy Ministerial, the Global Hydrogen Ports Coalition. So this will feed into that. So just to switch gears to what is the framework of the study, or what was the scope of the study. So on the left-hand side, you can see the geographical coverage of the ports that are in scope for the study. So it's the 27 European countries plus the UK and Norway. And we look at hydrogen demand and hydrogen supply. So from the demand side, we see the biggest demand opportunities or possibilities around transport, around port activities, urban areas, and indeed also in industry. On the supply side, technology neutral was also already highlighted. So I think for us the hydrogen supply side is both the green hydrogen production from wind, onshore, offshore, green hydrogen from solar PV, but also blue hydrogen to help decarbonize the existing grey hydrogen facilities. And the first two are more the local production, but also looking at, okay, what is the import potential or need, both on green and blue hydrogen. Then part of the scope is also to help indeed build those hydrogen business models and develop case studies with some recommendations. And as mentioned, and it can't be stressed enough, you need to have a broad stakeholder representation available to really enable that ecosystem to really start collaborating on these. We've listed a few, but it's not an exhaustive list, but I think also quite a few of those entities that we have listed here are represented in the room today, so that's great to see. So what are the initial results, or what are the results from the study on the demand side of hydrogen? By the end of the presentation, I'll have it figured out. Yes. So we see that there are quite a few clusters in Europe where we see big potential for hydrogen demand, including in Italy. The biggest cluster is in Northwest Europe, and what you can see here is we see the biggest potential indeed around industry, around urban areas, port activities, and transport. What you can also see is we've done a demand forecast between 2020 and 2050, and it's really after 2030 that we see the hydrogen economy, to say so, start picking up, with a lot of emphasis on the industry, on transport as well. So by 2050, the industrial component of hydrogen use will likely be the biggest. This next slide, is a little bit of a breakdown of where we see the hydrogen demand developing between 2020 and 2050. And as you can see, by 2050, the expectation is that industry will represent about 40% and transport around 30%. There's also a big category around buildings. I think that category is the most uncertain because there are alternatives also developing, but that's at least an outlook there. By the way, I think we've shared the material also up front, and I think most of the participants have received it. Yes. So feel free to go over it in detail, but also looking at the time, I don't want to dwell too much on the numbers, but it gives you a high level the overview that there's a lot of growth that will happen, but mainly beyond 2030 and in these sectors. Then switching to the supply side, we have looked at two different scenarios. The first scenario, what we call the base scenario, looks at a 75-25% split between local production and imports. It is rather expensive to transport hydrogen, so that's why whatever you can produce locally, of course, makes a lot of sense to do so. What we also foresee is that in this scenario, the majority of the 25% that still needs to be imported will be green imports. There will also be some blue imports, but the majority will be green imports. And we've also made a split on which regions are most likely to have which share of the self generation versus need to rely on the imports. And I think an important remark to make here is that when you look at the biggest hydrogen cluster in Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, and the northern part of Germany, that's where you have the biggest use of hydrogen, but that's also the region that relies most on imports of hydrogen, of low carbon hydrogen. And there again, also the ports play a very important role. Also Italy will play an important role, and we'll highlight that a little bit later, because that corridor of hydrogen, transporting hydrogen from the south of Europe to the northern part of Europe, there we see Italy also playing a big role, really also helping to transport the low carbon hydrogen coming from the Middle East, from Northern Africa, that needs to channel, and there we see also big potential for the port. So on this slide, on this scenario, this is where we see roughly where those hydrogen will be generated and will be imported from. The lowest the lowest import cost that we foresee is on some blue hydrogen coming from, the Middle Eastern region. But also green hydrogen, we believe, can be imported at around 3.5 euros per kg to fulfill the demand. And there's of course also a lot of local production part of that mix. If shipping hydrogen is expensive, because it's a difficult molecule, it's small, you need to compress it, you need to liquefy it, so very low temperatures, etc. So we foresee that quite a lot of the hydrogen will be transported in the form of an energy carrier like ammonia or methanol. And there are of course also very good use cases for ammonia directly or methanol directly. So if you can avoid having to go through recracking to really liberate the hydrogen again, that will save a lot of costs as well. So that's also one of the key messages. As mentioned, that we looked at two scenarios. So the other scenario is where Europe will have to rely a lot more on import. Hydrogen import due to potential constraints within the EU on renewable energy deployment. So what if there's not enough renewable energy that can be deployed in Europe? Then the hydrogen will have to be imported. On this slide, in the middle graph, you see the base case scenario on the left and the increased import scenario on the right, where you can see indeed that there's a lot less locally produced hydrogen that is forecasted, and a lot more of the hydrogen that needs to be imported, and we see a big increase in that case of green hydrogen import again, coming from the Middle East as well. And in that scenario, the situation for the northwestern countries will even become more reliant on importing hydrogen, so that will further also have an impact on this region. The need for pipelines transporting hydrogen will be very important. And this is then the breakdown at the lowest cost. Will be still the blue hydrogen imported for the foreseeable future, but also from Saudi, Oman, Egypt, we foresee that there's quite a bit of extra green hydrogen potential. And I know from having spent quite some time in the Middle Eastern region, they are indeed exploring to how can that green hydrogen that will be produced in the region, how can it effectively be transported what is the best route through Italy, through Amsterdam, Rotterdam, etc. So those are definitely opportunities to keep in mind for the region here. This is a very busy slide. I will not try to explain everything, but I think what is important to see, and that is to really stress the importance of that logistic hub. What you see in the middle of these graphs is a bar where Italy is also mentioned. That is really where we foresee that there will be a lot of hydrogen that needs to be imported in Europe and needs to reach northwestern Europe, and there these regions, including Italy, will play a key pivotal role to enable that. What you can also see a lot of straight lines there, so whatever is produced locally, most likely will also be consumed locally to avoid the costly transport. So with that, I will hand over to my colleague Wouter.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Are you able? Yeah. It's fine, right? Okay. So I will also quickly introduce myself very shortly. My name is Wouter Goosenaerts, consultant at Deloitte Belgium, and part of the decarbonization team of which Peter is leading as a director. So I've been involved since the beginning on this study on hydrogen imports, so it's already since 2021, I think. So we've been working a lot, and very happy to also now share our results and share also some more detailed insights. So how we ended up with the modelized results on H2 demand and supply for Europe was through looking to regional local clusters. And one of these local clusters was the Livorno region. So we also thought it would be interesting to zoom in on Livorno specifically and looking at, okay, what will be hydrogen demand, how will hydrogen be supplied specifically to the Livorno region. So that's what I intend to discuss at the moment.
Can you please...
Is it not... Yeah. Is it fine like this? Yeah, my apologies. Now I will try to figure out, voila, that's already a good start. So if we look at hydrogen demand, what's quite interesting is if we compare 29 to 2030 and then the dip in 2040. So it's a bit of a counterintuitive flow, and it's actually because of the demand of mineral oils, so for the hydrogenation of fossil fuels, which is currently the big demand here in the Livorno region, but it is of course expected to be phased out by 2050. So that's why we see actually a reduction in demand, but that's specifically because of that gray hydrogen that will go out of the mix. So that's an interesting one to note. Overall, we see those hydrogen demand increasing towards 39,000 tons in 2050, with main hydrogen off-taking sectors being the industry and transport, and then mostly transport according to our forecasts. If you then also look at the right-hand side, there you can see the impact on avoided greenhouse gas emissions. And again, we see that the main abatements take place in the transport sector. Looking then, or zooming in, on the end-use applications of road freight and shipping specifically, because like I mentioned earlier, transport is an important one, but what is included in transport? And there we see, again, road freight actually taking up by 2050 more than half of hydrogen demand, specifically for the transport sector. What's also interesting is that in 2030 we will already see quite some demand for hydrogen heavy-duty trucks, but international shipping is it still needs to take up, and that's going to happen towards 2040, where there will be quite a significant increase, then also again towards 2050. So that's what we see here. Initial takeoff, for hydrogen trucks, heavy-duty transport, followed then by international shipping. So if we then look at hydrogen supply, here we have excluded grey hydrogen, so we're only looking at green hydrogen produced in the EU then and blue hydrogen imports. So what we see in the base case scenario, yeah, it's so first of all, maybe interesting to know how we have modeled these local supply potential. So we look actually at three main categories. So the first one is attractiveness of wind and solar power generation in a specific region. The second one is looking at the regional maturity of those production technologies. And a third one is looking at the local renewable energy consumption. For example, if there is already a lot of electrification going on in a specific region, then it also makes sense that electricity, green renewable electricity, is going towards that electrification and is not being used then to necessarily being used to produce hydrogen. So it's also that technology neutrality within hydrogen, but also beyond hydrogen. Renewable energy can also be more interesting in specific end applications for electrification. So that's also being taken into account in the study. Local hydrogen production will be mainly through photovoltaic solar panels, and will play, of course, a major role, as well as the import specifically from Greece. So that's also something that we see, that there would be local hydrogen production through solar panels here in Livorno, but that it would also be imported from Greece. I think those are the main insights here. So I will now give the floor back to Peter to give some context on the case study. When will we answer questions? Maybe good on the study to already have a short session now, and then we can dive into the case study, or?
As you prefer. I guess we still have to hear the intervention of Director Tedeschi, that is going to join us online. Then I would like to make some highlights. Then if we have enough time, we can start a quick answer and response session now, but I think maybe it's better to close the public streaming session and go to the workshop session to have that. But if anyone has any highlight, observation, question, please feel free to intervene anytime. We would like today's discussion to be very informal and straight. Okay, so every kind of intervention is welcome anytime.
Yeah, indeed, feel free to interrupt us, to ask questions. So maybe just as I showed in the beginning, we did some reports, and now we are looking into case studies. As part of the scope of the Hydrogen at Port study, we were asked to develop 4 case studies. It has to be, or the intention is that we provide a picture of a well-spread geographical situation in Europe, and also focus the case studies on different topics, so we can cover more or less the entire ecosystem on hydrogen. So the 4 case studies that we are currently developing are in Livorno, of course, in the port of Klaipėda in Lithuania, 1 case study in Rotterdam, and 1 case study in Antwerp. In Antwerp, the focus of the case study is really on the use of hydrogen in port equipment to help decarbonize the port equipment. In Rotterdam, the case study will focus on hydrogen imports. What is the scenario? What is the case indeed for importing hydrogen? In Lithuania, we had a similar workshop a few weeks ago, where the focus is on green hydrogen production, so looking at electrolyzer, etc. And here, for the Livorno case, the intention is, or the objective of the case study is to look at the use of hydrogen in decarbonizing transport, so maritime and road transport. that will be the scope also of the workshop we'll have later, that we really focus on the use case applications of hydrogen in transport, in heavy duty transport and maritime. So what will be part of the scope is looking at the distribution and the end usage. So for the distribution, what will be included in the scope for Livorno is looking at a multimodal fueling station to supply hydrogen and potentially ammonia, and then, as mentioned, the use case of it. What we will also be doing, but we will not, I believe we will not tackle that in the workshop today, but it's also looking at safety considerations. But what we do also want to highlight or get out of the workshop today is looking at, okay, what are some of the benefits associated with enabling that hydrogen infrastructure or that hydrogen ecosystem here in Livorno from an environmental, economic and social benefit. And I think we've heard already a few highlights on that one, so leveraging the know-how, the entrepreneurship of the region to remain at the forefront of technology development, etc. I think those are kind of elements we also want to capture, to put part of our case study that will then be also published as part of the Hydrogen at Ports case study. So in the next part, my colleague will again go over through the initial financial analysis and some of the key assumptions we've done around the scope that I just highlighted, the refueling station and the use case.
Yes, thank you. So again, it's a preliminary analysis. We've made some assumptions, but very interesting to also hear your thoughts, to also really tap into your expertise, your experience, to give us some insights on numbers, or if you agree or not. But voila. Maybe to first of all start then with, or maybe to give some context first, sorry, but we have developed these 4 investment cases for a hydrogen-powered truck, a hydrogen-powered ferry, then an ammonia-powered container ship, and a refueling station that would then supply the necessary hydrogen and ammonia to the respective end applications. So if we look at a hydrogen-powered truck, what we see is revenues going towards 160,000 euros annually, and this is based then on a hydrogen truck with 40 tons transporting capacity. That would then drive around here in the Livorno region. So gross profit margin there, it's heavily influenced by the hydrogen price, of course. So the gross profit, it's your revenues minus your costs of goods sold. And there we see then that it increases significantly because of the reduction of your hydrogen price. It will go estimated from 10 euros a kilo at this time towards 3 euros or 3.5, 3.4 euros by 2035. What we also see is, if we don't take into consideration anything related to capex investments, if we just look at the fuel costs, then we would end up with a break-even price of 5.5 euros a kilo. That would then be more or less equal to the costs of diesel. So if we then compare it to the alternative, so if we compare the hydrogen-powered truck to an internal combustion engine truck driving on diesel, there we see a total cost of ownership which would be 8% higher. So from now until 2035, and that's then mainly because of the capex. That's double of a diesel one. So those are the results here that we have. What's interesting then, if we look at the fuel cost, so hydrogen compared to diesel, it's actually quite similar. And again, that's because of the hydrogen price that's significantly decreasing towards 2035. So if you then look at the hydrogen-powered ferry, again, looking at revenues for 100 passengers and a ticket price of 15 euros a passenger, Yeah, this is an estimation then for more the short distance ferry routes. We have based it also on a couple of ferries that are already going around in Antwerp. You have one, in the Nordics you have a couple. So we've based these assumptions on those already, on those use cases that are already there. So there we would have revenues increasing up to 8.1 million per year by 2050, with then the gross profit margin also increasing significantly, and again because of that decreasing hydrogen price. And what's of course important is here that we have this modelized price, but a lot of these assumptions will depend on how the hydrogen price will evolve towards 2035, 2040, 2050. And that's of course then linked to how the hydrogen economy will be developing here in Livorno. Of course, if you have a steady supply of hydrogen, satisfying demand, then you will also find an equilibrium, and that will also then decrease prices. So a lot of these assumptions of course depend on your supply. So what we also then see if we look at the total cost of ownership is that it's actually more or less comparable. Also important to note here is that we have also included the CO2 price. So maritime shipping 2026, it would be part of ETS if I'm not mistaken. So this is also included in the ferry and then also in the ammonia container ship later on. Now it should go to the ammonia container ship. Yes. So here, again, we have estimated revenues for a container ship with a capacity of 1,900 20-foot equivalent units. So it would be around 60 million euros annually by 2050, which again, the gross profit margin here would really accelerate after 2040, because we estimate that ammonia prices will significantly go down after 2040. So that's the effect of that one. If you then look at the total cost of ownership, then we see that it's 10% higher than a diesel or a diesel container ship. And that's mainly, of course, because of the fuels, with ammonia only, with ammonia being a costly factor in this total cost of ownership calculation. And so the capex that we estimate for retrofitting the vessel would be expected to be around 20 million euros. If I then go to the next one, it's the fueling station. Here, what's really clear is that a standalone refueling station doesn't make sense, because you will be purchasing your hydrogen and ammonia, but selling it, and the margin on that one will be very limited. So there, the question will be, can you incorporate it, integrate it in your import activities? So if you're already importing hydrogen yourself from outside the EU, of ammonia from outside the EU, and then you will be able to leverage a bigger margin, or you could be producing your own hydrogen and then facilitating it to off-takers through the refueling station. That would also make sense, but as a standalone refueling station, it will be a difficult case to make. Assumption-wise, we looked at a refueling station that would supply 400 kilos of hydrogen and almost 700 kilos of ammonia a day, and that would be then sufficient to fuel one ferry and 6 trucks, and then also satisfy 25% of ammonia demand from shipping in 2030. So that's only because in 2030 international shipping will also be very limited in Livorno according to the model. So there it would already be a first start, the first pilot to supply ammonia. I think what I already mentioned, that it will have to play a facilitating role and needs to be embedded in the production or import activities. We also then looked a bit at what would be the IRR, the internal rate of return of these investments. What we aim for, or what we look a bit at, is an IRR of 15%. So taking into account the low technology maturity of hydrogen and risk profile, we would definitely look at an internal rate of return above 10% and even 15%. So that's the first one. If you then look at the internal rates of return of the different projects, we see that none of them actually reach that rate of return. So that means that there is some tweaking that needs to be done. Of course, like I already mentioned, the hydrogen price will play a significant role. So if we can get that down, your internal rate of return will also significantly improve. But that's of course not something that you as a company really have in hand. So we also look then at two other levers that could potentially help your business case. One is of course sustainable transportation premium. So if you can ask for a green premium to your customers, you can already significantly increase your business case. And another one is of course the subsidies. We have here indeed looked at a CAPEX subsidy. OPEX subsidies could also be an option, of course, as you already mentioned earlier. So voila. I think that's the main takeaways. It would be really interesting also to hear a bit how you see these financial analyses. If you have some remarks, happy to hear some.
Se qualcuno vuole intervenire, fare domande, lo può fare anche in italiano, poi noi provvediamo alla traduzione. Va bene?
So if you have any comments on the assumptions we've made now or in the coming days, of course, that would be very useful for us to refine the business cases, to refine the models, because those assumptions will then also be used in our final case study that will be used to publish them. So at any point, if you have any comments, you have a.
Thank you very for the presentation. It's very profound and very interesting. But I think that there are steps to create this hydrogen revolution in Israel. I think that there are two issues here that are missing. One is the issue of the source of the energy, which if we're talking about green hydrogen, we're talking about solar or we're talking about windmills or whatever, or water supply, whatever can be a green energy supplier. And that's something that are missing here, and that's a very crucial part of the whole issue of the hydrogen. The other crucial part of the hydrogen is, of course, the storage, because we understand what's happening today in Europe, in other places concerning the networking of the electricity and all the problems that we are facing, and the storage is a very crucial issue as well. And that's something also need to be touched or need to be referred to, because as you know, there are different and various elements of storage, and I don't think that the world knows exactly what kind of storage will be done. And the last thing is the electrolyzing technology, which again, we are in the very, I would say, not the beginning, but we are not there yet. And there is something that also need to be discussed and to evaluate in the, the financial aspects as such. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very good points indeed. As mentioned, we're developing 4 case studies, and we need to address different topics in each case study. So the case study we're developing for Klaipėda is indeed really looking at, that electrolyzer business case. And there, some of the outcomes that we saw, it's a pilot case, and from an economic return, it's not the best case yet, because as you mentioned, indeed, technology is still developing. yeah, what about solar, what about wind, what about storage, indeed all of those. But what we also see is that by starting small with a pilot case, you will then help to reduce the risks in your next project. And that is a little bit the basis of the case, then at least in Klaipėda, to look at, okay, maybe the economic returns aren't good. We can indeed ask for more subsidies on the electrolyzer to help de-risk the technological immaturity. But it's really a Kickstarter for the next projects and to help them remain on the forefront, also on the electrolyzer business in that region. So it's a very good point, and we will take it along, but we will address it more in the case study of Klaipėda, if that makes sense.
We have here, between our stakeholders, some undertakings that has very interesting technologies and are working hard, also in terms of research and development related to electrolyzers. Then, to make just to highlight something, then I think we should stop, give the floor to Mr. Tedeschi, that is connected online, and then start again. I mean, to be here, no one claims to have the truth in their pocket, and we are talking about something that, especially in seaports, in maritime transport, is not going to happen tomorrow morning, okay? But it's something we are working hard to build up. And to be concrete and effective, we also need to talk about numbers. Let's say, calculemos, let's start counting in a serious, and I have to say also courageous way, as Deloitte and Ambrosetti are doing. This kind of discussion with stakeholders all together and then individually, let's say, are very useful to fine-tune all the assumptions behind what these guys are doing. And different stakeholders have different goals and comes from different industries and bring with them different points of view. Who makes electrolyzers, the fuel cell, the distribution, the shipbuilders, the plant engineering, tank engineering and production, the automotive also. They have a set of information we need somehow to extract to build a consistent strategy. And many of these stakeholders are already working in the hydrogen industry and in adjacent sectors. This is something very important I would like to highlight, because it somehow means paving the ground for a smart specialization strategy, both at the level of undertaking and at regional level, okay? So this is what I would like to say, and I think now we should hear Mr. Tedeschi, then I come to you if you have a question, okay? Yeah? Please.
Is forecast also to build the same analysis also for the storage of the hydrogen part and also for the component that use the hydrogen system, especially for the transportation and so on? Because I think if you want to have a complete overview, it's important also to have the evolution of the cost of the market and so on, also for the components.
Fine. It is a very interesting question. I don't know the answer. Maybe they do, but it is interesting as long as we think that in the coastal area of Tuscany, we have the opportunities, the skills, the industrial know-how to play a role in that, especially in tanks for hydrogen. Mm-hmm. I know someone who is here is already working on that.
Yeah, I'm looking at my colleague also to see if the hydrogen storage, if it's part of any of the case studies.
So storage specifically isn't part of one of the case studies, but it's also it's part of the study itself. So you have general insights as well on storage. It's not yet on the part that we've already published, but I think it will come. But we won't look at it specifically for the Livorno area. So that's not in scope of this case study.
Fine. So let's go to Mr. Tedeschi, that is connected online.
Yes, indeed. Hello, I'm here. Shall I speak in English? Good morning.
The floor is yours, Mr. Tedeschi.
Okay, thank you. Sorry I was not able to join you physically, but I insisted to have this remote connection in order to bring you a small contribution from Tuscany region. Of course, we have a strong relationship with the Port Authority of Livorno concerning also hydrogen potential developments. But of course, we are mainly involved also in sustaining the development of the port itself in infrastructural terms with the building of that so-called Darsena Europa, so a future development already ongoing of the port. And this is also, I think, very important concerning the topic of today and the project managed by Deloitte and the case studies about the use of hydrogen in ports. Because the first thing I would like to share, besides all the technical developments, the economic analysis to have a sustainable full use of hydrogen with all the components, with all the technological developments. Our experience so far from the point of view of the region is that the use of hydrogen is justified when there is a final market of use. If you don't have the market able to absorb hydrogen, all the supply chain, all the technological developments upstreams are of course important, but they are not yet sustainable because there is not a final market available. Okay, I know and I hope that this strong statement doesn't come as a full surprise, but as it happened with the other renewable energies, it is only once you reach, in that case, a parity grid level that technology, the use of technologies becomes really interesting and sustainable. So let me make some examples why I'm making this statement and why it is important with the case studies concerning also the Port of Livorno to be able to demonstrate and to build a full chain of use of course, of the production, of the storage, all the phases necessary to deal with hydrogen, but also the final use of it. As you know, hydrogen is also a part of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. There were available, and some of the money is still available, public money, around a little more than 3 billion. And the use was conceived to facilitate the adoption of hydrogen in different, with different aims. There were funds for the use of hydrogen in hard to abate sectors. And indeed, there is an open call at the Ministry of Environment dealing with supply chain projects ending by June of this year. And this is about a billion. And then the second billion is mostly directed towards heavy industries such as steel making or chemicals, to make some examples. So those opportunities are still there. And those opportunities, in our point of view, from our point of view, are well directed because, as I just mentioned, if you don't have a final use of hydrogen, then it is harder to make investments and to have all the necessary developments still going on. I was hearing about electrolyzers, for example, but there are many other issues dealing also with the storage, of course. Then there were for the use of hydrogen for mobility, regular mobility, whether it's trucks or private cars. And the experience about this tender didn't go very well. And the reason is that it is very hard to build an infrastructure to fund the realization of points of supply throughout for example, the Italian highways, when you don't have enough vehicles using hydrogen, whether they are private or public or for commercial or public transportation. So this means that it is preferable to start from a concentration, also in geographical terms, of potential use of hydrogen. That's why a port setting could be, from our point of view, also a good experimental area, as it might be also some logistic centers, or as it might be fleet management suppliers, because you have to have numbers of a final market. And the same thing happened for different reasons with the use of public funding for potential use of hydrogen on railways. Okay, here again, public money was addressed to build supply centers able to support the use of hydrogen on specific lines. But, for example, no one thought about the fact that the trains that combine the use of electricity, hydrogen, because of the weight of batteries, are much heavier. And not all lines existing in Italy, for instance, were built to sustain trains that are heavier than traditional electric engineered trains, or even using still, in some cases, oils or other derivatives of oils. So at the end, there were not enough public lines available to host hydrogen fueled trains. So these things are a paradox, and that's why you need case studies. You need to demonstrate that you can use hydrogen in specific settings and addressing specific destinations and markets able to absorb the use of hydrogen. Otherwise, it is just the risk is that it is just a technical exercise, but it doesn't come in numbers, in final numbers that are sustainable, both from a financial or technical or industrial point of view. So I just highlighted some also examples of, I wouldn't call them worst practices, but mistakes in planning somehow also from national institutions, and without giving any political color about that. But I could speak also of some good examples that are happening in Italy and in Tuscany as well. For example, there was also, still part of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, another tender supporting the production of hydrogen in industrial areas, combining the use of renewable energy, such as solar energy or wind energy, with the production of hydrogen through electrolyzers for a direct use for industrial purpose. And in that case, there was a national tender divided in different regional tenders. And speaking for Tuscany, we had about 17 millions available, and we were able, because of the private companies presented project, we were able to use this money, and indeed we had requests higher than the available funding. So we were able just to fund one project in a small portion of the second project, but we had up to 4 major demands, and we are asking to the national level to have additional money, because also 2 or 3 more additional projects could be funded. And the reason is that in that cases, I'm speaking about companies that are already using hydrogen in their industrial processes, so they can ensure already a final market. Hydrogen that is imported or produced as not as a green hydrogen, but as a gray or even a derivation of oil. And they can substitute this hydrogen with a direct production, more sustainable from all points of view. And this is a take-home point again. And the second project, which is not concerning the area of Livorno, but another port of Tuscany in the area of the port of Carrara, is presented by a company that is involved in project cargo logistic activities, okay, for a major builder of technology equipment. And in that case, they aim to produce and use hydrogen for their fleet of special trucks engaged in project cargo activities. So once again, in this case, it is not just a substitution of hydrogen in existing industrial projects, but it is the use of hydrogen because they have a critical mass of fleet of trucks they can manage in order to deliver an existing service, but substituting engines based on traditional combustion with hydrogen. So again, there is a specific market which can be addressed and ensuring the production of green hydrogen and the use of it. So just to conclude, besides those highlights concerning also national money, public money supporting the transition, the energy transition towards hydrogen, as a region, we did also another activity, which of course involved also the Port Authority of Livorno, because we somehow tested the existence of specializations and of a potential supply chain in Tuscany. And informally, we launched the idea of having a regional table for hydrogen. And we didn't expect, but an open invitation was addressed to R&D centers, universities, small and medium businesses, large companies, also other institutions such as port authorities or logistics centers. And we were able to have a conversation with 250 players, okay? And we were even forced to divide this conversation in 4 different tables concerning R&D, concerning training and education, concerning infrastructure and industrial use of hydrogen. And then at a certain moment, we decided to make an open call. Say, why don't you give us your potential ideas and projects for the development of use of hydrogen technologies and products in Tuscany. And we received 85 potential project ideas. So based on that, we even we decided to go a step further and to launch a public tender for the acquisition of formal propositions. And this was done at the end of last year. And basically, just to give you some numbers, we received 90 potential projects dealing with hydrogen, accounting for 3.3 billions of potential investments and requiring 1.7 billion of public funding. Of course, we don't have the money as a region to support this kind of critical mass of investments, but this gives an idea of the potential and the existence of the potential supply chain from research to final use of hydrogen already present in Tuscany. And most of those projects had also a TRL level close to 7, 8, so they are already mature projects. And most of them deal indeed with mobility, also energy storage, and also use in industry. Now, in the next months, we will move on and we will try to make some sort of matching of those projects, also with other additional funding opportunities. As you might know, we are also concerning European funds managed by regions. We are now in the 21-27 period. We have a delay caused by the pandemic, the Ukrainian war, but also the fact that the National Recovery and Resilience Plan somehow caused a shift in the beginning of the 7-year period of regional planning using structural European funds. So we will, for instance, issue a regional tender for R&D projects by the end of June, and some of the project ideas that were presented to the regional open tender will be addressed and invited to present a project also in this tender. And then there will be additional opportunities also in the second phase of 2023, sustaining and also the adoption of renewable energies and also the production and use of hydrogen within industrial processes of companies and other uses. So just to end up, I think that the meeting of today, the discussion that we are having based also on the approach that the Port Authority of Livorno which is an active and proactive approach to hydrogen, is the good way to address the issue of how and the conditions to use hydrogen also in port settings, because we still have to demonstrate that it is feasible and that it is economically viable. And again, I would like to stress out that the most important thing from our point of view are not just the technological challenges still there to have a full array of technologies mature for the use of hydrogen, but also is the capability to address a specific market which can absorb the hydrogen, of course, with all conditions, starting from safety and ending with economic sustainability. Otherwise, we still are in a phase where we all wish to use hydrogen, but we don't know yet, and we don't have yet a full demonstration of the possibility to exploiting it as a future energy vector, able to resolve many of the problems dealing also with the climate change, which we saw in the last days, what it could cause also in terms of damages, as it happened in Italy in the region of Emilia-Romagna. So we are not still there, okay, to use hydrogen in a full array of applications. We still need to work, but it is very, very important, and please forgive me if I repeat this as a mantra, to be able to identify and demonstrate that there is a final market able to absorb hydrogen and, of course, the conditions to produce green hydrogen. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Director Tedeschi. Thank you for your intervention. And I guess Engineer Viviani maybe have some remarks to do about what we said.
Thank you, Francesco Alberto. It was just some thoughts coming from the discussion, and thank you also to Mr. Tedeschi for this, let me say, very pragmatic dissertation regarding the opportunity of hydrogen. I will start from one point that was raised, let me say, about the need to raise demand around hydrogen. Let me just say that what we put in place within our national resilience plan, let me say, could work better. It was not a complete success under this way. And let me say, I think in this we can, let me say, define what could be also the role of the port to sustain this demand, to have a role for the territory, and to have a role for, let me say, international level. I would say that we had three main points that could, let me say, be analyzed when speaking about the lack of demand for hydrogen. The first one, we mentioned it several times, is the matter of OPEX. I hope that your challenging assumption regarding the price of hydrogen will be reached. What I know that currently in Italy, hydrogen is sold at 14 euro per kilogram in a very subsidized infrastructure in Bolzano. Probably some one of you if other different information regarding this. But of course it's something that put hydrogen outside, let me say, the competitive areas, even taking into account other decarbonization opportunities. And I think this is the second point that we need to understand. The first, let me say, is the other hydrogen opportunities. In your analysis, really brilliant, and thank you for sharing. I think that we could take into different account the potential opportunity to have oil and gas hydrogen production in the coast of Tuscany, not like a phase out, but the opportunity to have like a modular approach in the supply hydrogen in the area. The second one, I totally agree with the point that was raised in the question before about the green hydrogen. We have also to take into account the problem not only of where to catch renewable energy, take into account the additionality and the temporality constraint, that is capex, let me say, in the hydrolysis facility, but also the matter of water. I think that in the last year is something that in Italy we start thinking more deeply about the problem of water, and hydrolysis is an activity that requires water, and I think we need to think carefully about that. This was, let me say, about the OPEX. We just said that in this, the port could have a role to enable like a modular approach. We strongly believe that there could be an infrastructure-first approach, just to turn the egg and kitchen, let me say, problem. We need to come with infrastructure first, but let me say in a clever way, just adding the infrastructure that we need to kickstart the first matter of demand. And in this, let me say, the potential rise of demand around the coastal opportunity could be, let me say, a pivotal activity. In your analysis, you put a lot of effort on the road transport. I think that in this we should think about whether there is some other opportunities, especially looking at the biofuels in the coming years, that could, let me say, postpone the potential convenience of hydrogen. And let me say it's a point of attention. The second point that, on my opinion, could have a role is hampering the potential demand is the supply uncertainty. I think that we, let me say, hampering the rise of potential project for the use of hydrogen because there is a lot of uncertainties on one side, where I can put the hydrogen that I can produce, and the other side, where can I find the hydrogen that may use. And in this, let me say, the port could be like a potential hub for managing those kind of volume, always leveraging on a modular and flexible approach in understanding this. But more of this, I think that we need to focus on the role of the port, not only within its perimeter, only on the activities within the port or outside the port for the maritime, but also outside. I think that the port could be like a test lab for those companies that need to test technology. They need to find the environment in which to find hydrogen, in which to find the facility to use hydrogen. And in this, how we need to focus on what could be the industrial opportunities around hydrogen in Tuscany, not only in terms of production and consumption, but also in terms of value chains. As I said, there are some part of value chains of Tuscany in the maritime industry, in the automotive industry, in the chemical industry, and so on, that could leverage on the potential market of new technologies that need to be developed, but need to also be tested, and the port could be an environment that could help in this. I would also like to see in this first study a more broad role of Europe on the hydrogen roadmap, of Italy, sorry, on the hydrogen roadmap of Europe. I think that Italy, you mentioned this, could have a role for the large amount of import that we could have in the future, could have a role even in taking into account the potential production of blue hydrogen, whether in the case of European Commission will allow us to speak about decarbonized blue hydrogen, even taking into account that in Europe we have 3 main hubs of potential capture and storage of CO2, where so we need to catch the CO2 that come from of bio or atmospheric CO2, and they are in the north and in the Mediterranean area. And so let me say, Francesca Alberto, there were just few thoughts regarding the potential role of Livorno hub, but I think my main feedback is to take into account the role of the port, not only for the port activities, but only for the activities that are outside, not limit this to the transports, but also to the potential Tesla for different kind of industries, and to take into account the role of the port for a supplier of hydrogen, looking even outside Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, and well noted. Yeah.
And maybe also shortly, that's indeed, I think the role of the port, it's a crucial one, and I think in the next part of the workshop we will also dive deeper into that one, like what role the port can play, what organizations, companies expect from the port. So that's something that we will discuss after the break. So looking forward to that one as well.
Thank you. So, coming to a conclusion of this first part of our morning, I have to say that what Mr. Viviani told us is the result of the work we made it together. And I have to say that 2 years or something like 18 months ago, we all was quite skeptical about a number of initiatives related to hydrogen. Then, thanks to Ambrosetti, thanks to Engineer Mele, and thanks to the enterprises that come to talk with us, we understood that there was no room to be skeptical. It is possible to have hydrogen solutions in rail transport, in maritime transport, in other kind of local and port-related activities. So this is something important. And I would like also to say that we need to make pilot actions now to start somehow. Make a very first step. Rome wasn't built in a day, but we need a first step. And the use is something paramount importance, but at the end, with the tenders that will be launched by Regione Toscana using the National Recovery Plan, we have a great opportunity. But we need to well define what is going to be financed. We don't need pilot action standing alone. We need to finance complete also if small value chains related to hydrogen. And somehow we have to come from pilot approach to a sort of demonstration in a real field of larger scale of what is possible to do. In this sense, I have to say port can really play a major role also as, let's say, test bed or test bench for the introduction of hydrogen. So I think we can close now our first session, have a break, and then start with the workshop. Thank you, everybody, also to the one who was with us in connection online. Thank you.